Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind brushing against your face, the world stretching endlessly before you. In that vastness you feel a curious emptiness and a quiet liberation all at once. Love once came to you like a storm, fierce and consuming, and for a moment you believed surrendering was living. But something shifted. Something inside you woke up, and with that awakening came a profound understanding that the heart is not a playground for attachment or illusion. We chase love because we seek completion outside of ourselves. We reach for someone else, hoping their touch, their smile, their presence will fill the void we carry inside. And we fall, not because love is weakness, but because our hearts are still asleep. We confuse longing with depth, desire with truth, attachment with connection. But the awakened heart sees the patterns. It watches the endless cycles of craving and disappointment, the illusions we weave to avoid the silence within, and it finally chooses something deeper. The awakened no longer fall in love because they have realized that love is not an act of clinging. It is a state of being that flows freely, without expectation or possession. They have touched the root of themselves, and in that touch, they have found a completeness that no other can provide. The fire that once sought validation in another now burns within. A quiet warmth that does not demand attention, that does not collapse under the weight of absence. To fall in love with someone else now feels like mistaking a reflection for the sun, a flicker for the fire. When we speak of awakening, we speak of a transformation that reaches the very core of our being, a subtle but powerful shift that changes how we perceive life, love, and ourselves. The awakened understand, in a way that is both gentle and absolute, that true fulfillment is not something we can find in another person. It is not hidden behind a smile, a touch, or a whispered promise. Many of us spend our lives seeking completion in others, mistaking another person's presence for the cure to our emptiness, hoping that their affection will fill the gaps we carry inside. This longing is natural, but it is also a sign that the heart has not yet turned inward. The awakened have turned inward. They have faced the quiet, sometimes uncomfortable spaces of their own soul, and in that confrontation, they have discovered something profound. They are already complete. This realization does not arrive all at once, nor does it announce itself with fireworks. It is quiet. Like the moment the sun rises and touches the world with light, revealing the beauty that was always there, but hidden in shadow. They begin to notice the ways in which they sought validation in relationships, the subtle patterns of expectation and disappointment. The way love was often less about connection and more about filling a void. They see the countless moments when longing and desire drove their actions, when the need for approval or affection dictated their choices. And in this seeing, there is liberation. They understand that another person cannot give what they already possess. The awakened embrace themselves fully. They see their own fears, their own insecurities, and even the parts of themselves that society may have called unworthy or imperfect, and they accept them without reservation. There is no turning away, no pretending, no clinging to illusions. In this acceptance, the heart discovers its own sufficiency. It is enough. It is whole. This sufficiency does not make them cold or unfeeling, nor does it isolate them from the richness of human connection. On the contrary, it allows them to approach life and relationships with a clarity and generosity that is impossible when the heart is grasping for completion elsewhere. When the heart is awakened in this way, love is no longer a desperate pursuit. It becomes a reflection of what already exists within. There is no frantic search for the right person or the perfect circumstances to feel fulfilled. They no longer believe that happiness is contingent on another person's presence or approval. Instead, they create a life that is rich, meaningful, and deeply satisfying on its own. They cultivate joy, peace, and passion from the inside out. They nurture themselves, honor their desires, and celebrate their being. In doing so, they become magnets for authentic connection, not because they need it, but because they are fully present and fully alive. This understanding transforms the way they love others as well. When they do connect with someone, it is not an act of desperation or dependency. It is a meeting of two complete beings, each whole in themselves. There is a freedom in this kind of love, a grace that does not bind or suffocate. The awakened do not fall in love in the old sense, because their hearts are not empty spaces seeking to be filled. They are vessels of their own completeness. They can give without expectation, share without attachment, and care without losing themselves. The journey to this understanding is often marked by struggle, reflection, and moments of solitude. It requires a willingness to confront one's own shadows, to sit with silence, and to let go of the stories we have told ourselves about needing others to be happy. But once this understanding is realized, life opens in ways that were previously unimaginable. The awakened move through the world with a sense of calm, confidence, and quiet power. They are present in every encounter, but they are not dependent on it. They find beauty in moments without needing to capture them, joy in experiences without needing to possess them, and love without needing to bind it. The heart that understands its own completeness no longer chases, no longer clings, and no longer fears the absence of another. It stands free, steady and luminous, a force of its own wholeness. In this freedom, love becomes not a need but a choice, not a crutch but a celebration, not a surrender but an offering. And in this offering, they realize that the fulfillment they once sought in others was waiting quietly inside them all along. The awakened have a vision that is clear and uncompromising, one that sees the subtle distinction between attachment and authentic connection. Many of us grow up believing that love and attachment are the same thing, that needing someone, depending on their presence, and clinging to their approval is a sign of passion or depth. We are taught to fear being alone, to seek validation outside ourselves, and to measure our worth by the intensity of our relationships. The heart that has awakened, however, sees this clearly. Attachment is not love. It is a habit of seeking completion where it cannot be found, a reflex born from fear and longing, and a way to distract ourselves from the silence and fullness of our own being. Authentic connection, on the other hand, is born from wholeness, freedom, and a deep respect for the other. Attachment is the invisible chain that keeps us tied to outcomes, emotions, and expectations. It is the yearning that transforms the beauty of a moment into a demand, the connection into a possession, and love into a need. When we are attached, we are not truly present. We are anticipating, fearing, or clinging. We measure our happiness by the consistency of someone's presence, by their approval, and by the way they mirror our desires back to us. The awakened watch this pattern with compassion and clarity. They remember their own past, the way they once gave pieces of themselves in exchange for a fleeting sense of security. And they realize that attachment, while disguised as love, is a reflection of an incomplete heart. Authentic connection, by contrast, flows naturally and freely. It arises when two beings meet not to complete each other, but to share their fullness. It is not dependent on outcomes, not conditional on agreement or proximity, and not motivated by fear of loss or need for validation. The awakened understand that, to truly connect with another, we must first stand fully in ourselves. They have faced the silence, embraced their solitude, and discovered the depth and richness within. In this place, relationships are no longer about filling a void or escaping emptiness. They are about exchange, harmony, and the recognition of another soul as a mirror, not as a crutch. This discernment changes everything about the way the awakened approach life and relationships. They notice the subtle signs of attachment in others and themselves, the need to control, the anxiety over absence, the fear of rejection. They feel the urge to cling, and they let it pass without judgment. They do not force intimacy, nor do they pursue connection out of necessity. They are willing to step back, to create space for themselves and others, and to allow relationships to breathe and exist without suffocating expectations. In this, they discover a freedom and serenity that is impossible in attachment, a lightness that comes from loving without needing, from caring without possessing, from connecting without surrendering the self. This clarity also teaches the awakened to be gentle with others. They no longer demand that someone fulfill them or reflect their worth back to them. They approach connection with curiosity and presence, seeing people not as objects to satisfy desire or fill emptiness, but as companions on a journey. They can love fully, openly, and deeply. Yet they do so without fear or desperation. They honor the autonomy of the other, and they honor their own. This balance creates relationships that are not binding but expansive, not turbulent but harmonious, and not fleeting but profoundly resonant. In a world where attachment masquerades as love in countless forms, romantic, familial, or social, the awakened stand apart because they have learned to recognize the difference. They see when longing is a reflection of incompleteness, when dependence is a mask for fear, and when passion is entanglement rather than celebration. In this vision, they choose not to fall into the trap of confusion, not to surrender to the illusion that someone else can make them whole. Instead, they cultivate the capacity for genuine connection, one that nurtures, inspires, and uplifts without demanding or clinging. The awakened heart does not live in fear, need, or desperation. It moves through life with awareness and freedom, engaging with others from a place of fullness, not emptiness. It knows that authentic connection can exist only when each being is complete unto themselves. When this understanding takes root, the heart no longer seeks attachment, no longer confuses desire with love, and no longer surrenders its wholeness for fleeting companionship. It has learned that the deepest bonds are formed not through need, but through presence, not through clinging, but through mutual recognition, and not through attachment, but through genuine, free connection. In this wisdom, the awakened discover that connection without attachment is not a loss but a liberation, not a sacrifice but a grace. And it is in this grace that they walk freely through the world, fully themselves and fully alive. The awakened no longer seek validation or completion from another, because they have discovered the source of their worth lies entirely within themselves. For most people, the heart has long been a pendulum swinging between hope and despair, elation and disappointment, depending on how others respond to us. We live our lives in constant pursuit of approval, craving recognition, love, and acceptance as if these external gestures were the measure of our value. We confuse attention with love, presence with security, and affection with fulfillment. But the awakened see this pattern for what it truly is, a reflection of a heart that has not yet turned inward, a mind that has not yet realized that the approval of others is never enough to make us whole. The moment of awakening begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. It may come through suffering, solitude, or simply the passage of time that forces a deeper reflection on life. The awakened recognize the futility of depending on someone else to fill the spaces within. They have looked deeply at their past, recalling the countless times they sought validation from the eyes and words of others, only to feel the emptiness return once the attention faded. They see how much of human suffering comes not from the absence of love itself, but from the mistaken belief that love from another can save us, validate us, or make us complete. This realization is both liberating and transformative. When the heart understands that it does not need to be completed by another, it experiences a freedom that few ever taste. No longer is the self at the mercy of someone else's mood, their presence, or their approval. No longer does happiness depend on a smile, a message, or the feeling of being wanted. The awakened cultivate their own approval, their own love, their own validation. They understand that fulfillment is an inside job, and that the world can offer companionship, beauty, and shared experiences. But it cannot grant the profound sense of completeness that comes from knowing oneself fully. This self-sufficiency changes the way the awakened move through relationships and life. They no longer cling, no longer compromise their essence for the sake of acceptance, and no longer tolerate situations or people that diminish their sense of self. Where once the fear of rejection might have dictated choices, now clarity and inner authority guide every step. Their interactions with others are no longer tainted by desperation or insecurity. They give love without needing it returned in a particular way. They share themselves freely, but they do not surrender their power, their autonomy, or their peace. They have discovered that the deepest satisfaction comes not from being chosen or approved of by others, but from choosing and approving themselves in every moment. This understanding also reshapes the way they experience desire and intimacy. The awakened can connect deeply, passionately, and sincerely, yet without the chains of dependency. They are fully present, fully engaged, yet fully themselves. The intensity of connection no longer triggers anxiety or fear because their sense of worth is not contingent on it. They have cultivated an internal reservoir of love, strength, and validation that requires no supplementation. In essence, they become whole. And in their wholeness, they attract relationships that reflect harmony rather than need, freedom rather than restriction, and presence rather than absence. The process of internalizing this truth is gradual and requires courage. The mind resists the notion of self-sufficiency because society teaches us otherwise, because we are conditioned to measure ourselves by external markers of acceptance. Yet the awakened persist. They turn inward, confront their fears, embrace their shadows, and celebrate their strengths. They understand that dependence on external validation is a form of bondage, that seeking approval is a trap, and that true freedom is rooted in knowing one's own value, beyond opinion, beyond circumstance, beyond the ephemeral gestures of the world. The heart that no longer seeks validation from another discovers a clarity that is both profound and simple. It recognizes that relationships are gifts, not lifelines, that connection is enrichment, not a requirement for survival. In this state, love becomes a choice rather than a need, presence becomes a joy rather than a necessity, and life itself becomes a mirror reflecting the completeness that has always existed within. In this freedom, the awakened stand grounded, unshaken by rejection, unbound by expectation, and unafraid of solitude. They no longer seek validation or completion outside themselves, and in that liberation, they discover a strength, a peace, and a love that is unassailable, eternal, and entirely their own. The awakened view love through a lens that is free from possession, expectation, and dependency. They have come to understand that love is not something to seize, own, or control, but a state of being that flows naturally and unconditionally. For most people, love is entwined with desire, attachment, and fear. The desire to hold someone close, the attachment to the comfort they provide, and the fear of losing them. These forces create a constant tension, a pendulum swinging between joy and anxiety, fulfillment and emptiness. The awakened, however, have moved beyond this cycle. They recognize that to truly love is to allow freedom, to honor the wholeness of both oneself and another, and to embrace the present without clinging to it. Love, in its purest form, does not depend on the other person conforming to our expectations or meeting our needs. The awakened have learned that the need to possess or control love diminishes its essence, that when we grasp too tightly, we lose the flow, the beauty, and the natural rhythm of connection. They see that falling in love, in the traditional sense, often comes with strings attached, with subtle demands and unspoken conditions, and that these attachments are rooted in fear rather than truth. The awakened heart, having recognized these patterns, no longer participates in this illusion. They understand that love is not about completion, but about expression, not about dependence, but about resonance, not about clinging, but about presence. This shift changes the way they approach relationships and interactions profoundly. They do not seek someone to complete them, to fill gaps, or to validate their worth. Instead, they enter into connection as complete beings, fully responsible for their own fulfillment, joy, and growth. They can share their hearts openly without fear of loss, because the source of their love is not external, but internal. Their love is a reflection of their own wholeness, a gift offered freely and without expectation. In this way, the awakened cultivate intimacy that is rich, authentic, and sustainable, unburdened by need or compulsion. The awakening also brings a profound clarity about boundaries and respect. The awakened understand that loving freely means loving without suffocating, without imposing, and without attempting to mold the other into a version that satisfies personal desire. They honor the autonomy of the other as fiercely as they honor their own. Love becomes a dance of freedom, a meeting of souls that celebrates individuality while embracing connection. There is no need to chase, no anxiety over absence, and no desperation for validation. They move through relationships with grace and mindfulness, aware that the most authentic bond is one that arises naturally, without force or expectation. This understanding transforms how they experience passion, attachment, and vulnerability. They can be deeply present in the intensity of a moment, fully immersed in connection, yet they are not dependent on it for their sense of self. They do not fear loss, nor do they cling to permanence. Their hearts are strong because they are grounded in themselves, and their love is expansive because it is not constricted by fear, expectation, or dependency. They experience passion not as a need, but as an expression, not as a tether, but as a flow. The process of arriving at this understanding is often gradual and requires introspection, reflection, and a willingness to confront old patterns. The awakened have examined the ways in which they once sought to hold on to people, experiences, or emotions, and they have faced the fear of emptiness that drove this behavior. They have discovered that freedom and love are inseparable, that true intimacy thrives only when the heart is liberated from possession and expectation. They have learned to embrace both connection and solitude, to honor the impermanence of all things, and to allow love to exist as it is rather than as a projection of need. In embracing love as a state of being rather than a possession, the awakened also inspire others to rise into their own freedom. They show by example that it is possible to be fully present, fully engaged, and fully loving without sacrificing the self or demanding fulfillment from another. Their presence is calm, their affection is authentic, and their hearts are strong, capable of sustaining connection without dependency. Ultimately, the awakened understand that love, in its truest form, cannot be forced, owned, or measured. It is not a transaction, nor is it a refuge from emptiness. It is a reflection of the inner fullness they have cultivated, a resonance of their own wholeness. In this understanding, love becomes not a storm that sweeps them away, but a gentle current that flows alongside them, enriching life without binding it, illuminating the world without dimming their own light. And in this, they discover a freedom and peace that surpasses all longing. The awakened experience intimacy in a way that is profoundly different from the world's conventional understanding, where many see intimacy as surrendered dependence, or the merging of two incomplete selves. The awakened recognize it as a space of mutual respect, presence, and authenticity. They no longer need someone else to validate, complete, or define them. And in that absence of need, they discover the true essence of closeness. Intimacy is not about filling a void or escaping solitude. It is about the willingness to stand fully in oneself while opening to another, creating a connection that neither binds nor diminishes. In the past, intimacy often carried with it the weight of expectation. We have all experienced the longing for connection that comes with conditions and assumptions. The silent tension of wondering if we are enough, if we are loved deeply enough, if our presence will be cherished consistently. The awakened see these dynamics clearly and refuse to participate in them. They understand that true intimacy cannot flourish in fear, doubt, or the compulsion to control. When the heart is awakened, it no longer allows attachment or need to masquerade as love. Instead, it cultivates presence, attentiveness, and a willingness to be fully available without surrendering autonomy. The awakened know that to engage deeply with another without losing oneself requires a level of self-awareness and self-love that is rare. They have spent time alone, confronted their own shadows, and embraced their own completeness. In doing so, they have built a foundation that allows them to enter relationships without dependency. They can listen without judgment, share without fear, and love without clinging. Their presence is steady, their attention is genuine, and their care is unforced. They have learned that the strength of intimacy lies not in merging two halves into a whole, but in allowing two wholes to exist side by side, touching, resonating, and enriching each other. This understanding reshapes how they experience vulnerability as well. Vulnerability, for the awakened, is not a risk to be avoided or a weakness to hide. It is an act of honesty, a conscious choice to reveal oneself without expectation of reciprocation or validation. They do not fear rejection or abandonment because their sense of self is secure, whole, and unshakable. When they open their hearts, it is a gift offered freely, not a plea for acceptance. This kind of intimacy transforms relationships, creating bonds that are resilient, flexible, and deeply nourishing. It is a space where both parties can breathe, exist authentically, and be seen without the pressure to conform, perform, or please. The awakened also understand the impermanence of all connections, and this awareness allows them to engage without clinging. They see that relationships are not guarantees of happiness or security, but opportunities for growth, understanding, and shared experience. They approach intimacy with gratitude rather than expectation, presence rather than attachment, and love rather than need. This freedom creates a dynamic in which connection is celebrated for what it is, rather than mourned for what it cannot be. It is in this balance of openness and self-possession that the awakened experience the richest, most profound form of intimacy. Furthermore, the awakened do not confuse intimacy with possession or control. They recognize that trying to bind another person, define them, or make them conform to personal desires diminishes the purity of connection. Intimacy flourishes when it is allowed to exist naturally, when each person retains their sovereignty while being fully present for the other. In this understanding, the depth of a relationship is measured not by dependence or proximity, but by the freedom, authenticity, and mutual recognition it fosters. The awakened bring a calm, steady energy to their connections, one that does not demand but simply honors, one that does not cling, but simply allows. The transformation in intimacy also extends to their daily interactions with the world. They can be present with friends, family, and even strangers without expectation, without need, and without compulsion. Every interaction becomes a choice, a conscious engagement that is enriching rather than depleting. Their presence is grounding, their attention is focused, and their relationships are marked by clarity and generosity. They have discovered that intimacy is not about the quantity of connection, but the quality, not about attachment, but about alignment, not about dependence, but about mutual resonance. In the end, the awakened understand that intimacy is not the merging of need, but the meeting of wholeness. It is a space where hearts can open fully without fear, where connection does not require sacrifice of self, and where love flows freely without binding. In this realization, they discover a depth of connection that is rare, pure, and sustaining, a bond that enriches without diminishing and nurtures without enclosing. And in this, They experience a freedom and richness in intimacy that is both rare and eternal. The awakened have a way of seeing the world that allows them to experience beauty and passion without the need to cling, possess, or control. For most people, desire and admiration are intertwined with fear and attachment. We are taught, consciously or unconsciously, that to love something deeply means to hold on to it tightly, to guard it jealously, or to measure our own happiness by its permanence. Passion is often mistaken for need, admiration for ownership, and excitement for security. The awakened, however, move through life with a clarity that allows them to experience the same intensity of feeling without falling into these traps. They can encounter beauty, feel desire, and be inspired by another or by life itself, yet they do so without letting it dominate or define their sense of self. When the heart awakens, it recognizes the transient nature of all experiences, yet it does not close itself off from them. The awakened understand that the intensity of a moment does not require attachment. They can witness a sunset, hear a song meet a soul, or feel passion without attempting to capture it, possess it, or demand it stay. In doing so, they experience a freedom that is rarely available to those whose hearts are still seeking completion outside themselves. Passion, for the awakened, is a reflection of aliveness, not a measure of dependence. Beauty is a gift to be observed, not a commodity to be owned. Desire is an energy to be felt, not a force to bind another. This awareness transforms the way they interact with others and with life itself. The awakened are fully present in moments of connection and inspiration, yet they do not allow themselves to be swept away by them. They see the brilliance of another person, the allure of life, and the intensity of emotion without needing it to define their own worth or stability. Their hearts are anchored in themselves, not in circumstances or people. They can appreciate without possessing, enjoy without demanding, and admire without seeking control. This ability to remain grounded while fully feeling is one of the hallmarks of an awakened heart. In matters of desire, this clarity is particularly profound. The awakened no longer confuse attraction with necessity. They understand that desire is natural and beautiful, but it does not have to lead to dependency, jealousy, or desperation. They can feel drawn to another without needing to consume them, fall in love without needing them to complete them, and experience passion without fear of impermanence. This detachment does not diminish their capacity to feel. In fact, it deepens it. By not clinging, they allow the full spectrum of experience to flow freely, uninterrupted by fear or expectation. The awakened also understand that beauty and passion are not the same as possession. One can be moved by the elegance of a moment, the brilliance of a person, or the intensity of emotion without the urge to control it. This awareness brings a lightness to life that is impossible when attachment governs the heart. They recognize that trying to hold on to something or someone diminishes its essence and creates suffering. By letting go of the need to possess, they open themselves to the fullness of experience, allowing beauty and passion to exist in their natural form, fluid and unconfined. This clarity also extends to the way they navigate relationships and intimacy. The awakened approach connection with the understanding that each person is whole unto themselves. They can share their energy, their affection, and their passion freely without expecting it to be returned in a specific way. They do not demand permanence, validation, or control. They can witness the brilliance of another soul, be inspired by it, and celebrate it without the need to tether it to themselves. In this freedom, both parties are able to exist authentically without the distortions that attachment brings. The ability to experience life fully without clinging requires courage, awareness, and self-possession. The awakened have cultivated a deep sense of self, an internal completeness that allows them to encounter intensity without being consumed by it. They have faced the moments when desire, longing, and attachment once ruled their hearts and have chosen instead to stand firm in their own wholeness. From this place, passion becomes expansive, beauty becomes luminous, and life itself becomes a dance of engagement without entanglement. In the awakened state, the heart discovers a way to feel deeply while remaining free, to appreciate without controlling, and to be moved without being bound. They touch life with intensity, energy, and presence, yet their sense of self remains unshaken. Desire, passion, and beauty are no longer sources of longing or anxiety, but expressions of the alive, free, and conscious heart. In this, they find a liberation that allows them to experience the richness of life in its purest, most unconfined form. And it is here that the awakened truly thrive. The awakened move through life with a calm, clear, and self-sufficient presence that sets them apart from those still entangled in dependency and need. They no longer allow external circumstances, fleeting emotions, or the opinions of others to dictate the state of their heart. In a world where many measure themselves through the approval, affection, and recognition of others, the awakened stand firmly grounded in their own wholeness. Their inner world is no longer subject to the fluctuating tides of external validation, and this independence gives them a stability and freedom that is rare and deeply powerful. This self-sufficiency does not emerge overnight. It is the result of inner work, reflection, and a willingness to confront the illusions that once guided the heart. The awakened have spent time in solitude, observing the ways in which attachment, fear, and longing shape their decisions and emotions. They have seen how dependence on others' love or attention creates turbulence, insecurity, and dissatisfaction. Through this recognition, they have cultivated a profound sense of responsibility for their own joy, peace, and fulfillment. They understand that no external source can provide lasting happiness, and that the heart's true home is within itself. With this clarity comes a remarkable steadiness. The awakened are not easily shaken by loss, disappointment, or absence. They do not cling to what is fleeting, nor do they allow external events to define their self-worth. Their lives are guided not by fear or expectation, but by awareness, intention, and presence. They can experience connection, beauty, and passion fully, yet without being consumed or destabilized by them. In this state, the heart becomes resilient, able to weather the impermanence of life with grace, and able to engage with the world without losing itself in it. This self-sufficiency also shapes their relationships. The awakened enter connections not out of need, but out of choice. They share their energy, love, and attention freely, yet they do not bind others with expectation or demand. They are capable of intimacy, passion, and empathy without surrendering their autonomy. This allows them to connect authentically, appreciating others for who they are rather than projecting onto them the needs, desires, or insecurities that once controlled their hearts. Their presence is stabilizing and inspiring because it is rooted in wholeness, not in dependency or fear of loss. The awakened have learned to distinguish between presence and possession. They can admire, desire, and experience closeness without attempting to control or define it. They understand that life's most meaningful connections are those that arise naturally, without coercion or compulsion, and they approach these connections with gratitude rather than expectation. In doing so, they honor both themselves and others, creating a space where authenticity and freedom coexist. Their hearts are free from the chains of attachment, and in this freedom, they discover a depth of experience that is impossible when the need to control or possess dictates their actions. Another defining aspect of the awakened is their ability to remain present and engaged without attachment. They can fully participate in life, feeling deeply and responding authentically, yet they do so from a place of groundedness. The external world, the people, events, and experiences does not dictate their inner state. They have cultivated a resilience that allows them to remain calm and centered even in moments of turbulence. This presence creates a sense of ease and trust, both within themselves and in their interactions with others. They can love, share, and contribute without the anxiety of losing themselves in the process. The awakened understand that their freedom and clarity are gifts not to be compromised. They have touched the essence of their own completeness and recognize that it cannot be surrendered for temporary comfort, fleeting affection, or superficial approval. They walk through life fully present, fully alive, and fully themselves, touching the world without attachment, connecting without dependency, and loving without losing. In this state, the heart is unshakable, luminous, and profoundly free. Ultimately, the awakened move through life not untouched by beauty, passion, or connection, but untouched by the illusions of need and dependency. They live with a self-sufficiency that allows them to experience all that life offers without surrendering their essence. Their strength is quiet yet undeniable, their freedom complete, and their presence deeply inspiring. In this grounded wholeness, they discover a serenity and power that transcends the fleeting storms of emotion and circumstance. And it is here that the awakened find their truest expression and deepest peace. As we reach the end of this journey, it becomes clear that the awakened heart moves through life with a profound clarity, freedom, and self-sufficiency. They no longer fall into the traps of attachment, dependency, or the search for validation outside themselves. They love deeply, connect authentically, and experience passion and beauty fully, yet without clinging or compromise. Their hearts are whole, their presence steady, and their lives guided by awareness, choice, and inner fulfillment. In embracing this truth, they reveal that true love, intimacy, and connection arise not from need, but from completeness, from freedom, and from the courage to stand fully in oneself. May each of us take inspiration from this understanding, nurturing our own inner wholeness, embracing our freedom, and moving through life with clarity, courage, and a heart that knows its own completeness. May we experience connection without attachment, beauty without possession, and love as a flowing, unbounded energy that enhances life without diminishing ourselves. Good luck on your own journey of awakening and self-discovery. Thank you for listening, and may your hearts rise into the fullness of their own light.